Muzan was defeated in the original story, but what would have happened if he actually won and conquered the sun? If you think that would be the end of the world, well, you're wrong, and quite terribly at that. You're going to find out what actually happened, but before we go deep into how Muzan would go moonwalking across the entire planet, there were actually 9 ways he could have saved himself from getting burned into a creme brulee. The first one is killing Tanjiro's family in, let's say, a more humane way. The main factor behind Tanjiro's drive was not only to turn Nezuko back into a human, but also to avenge the gruesome murder of his whole family in his absence. Now, instead of just waltzing into Tanjiro's home unannounced, Muzan could have just strutted along his way. But no, he had to poke the hornet's nest. The best outcome here for everyone would have been Muzan just leaving Tanjiro's family alone and moving along the moonlight sky. Or, at the very least, if he had killed everyone, including Nezuko, Tanjiro would have been too depressed to join the Demon Slayer Corps, or hell, fight Upper Moon. So, at the end, Muzan's unriddled lust for bloodshed initiated an event that would lead to his own blood being on the floor. However, the mistakes Muzan made aren't just limited to the 20th century Taisho era. Back during the Sengoku era, 500 years ago, Muzan made another cowardly mistake that cost him his life 5 centuries later. If you remember the first time Muzan met Yoriichi in a deep forest, the lady accompanying him was none other than Tamayo herself, who was fooled into becoming a demon by Muzan on the pretext of healing her. However, Muzan's promises fell short back then, as she ended up eating her husband and child. Years later, during his confrontation with Yoriichi, Muzan was able to escape by a hair. However, during the scuffle, he let his control over Tamayo loose. Now we know that Muzan can kill any demon he wants at any time, as he's telepathically connected to them, like we saw in the case of Suzumaru. This came back to bite Muzan in the ass in 2 ways. First, it allowed Tamayo enough time to work on drugs that could turn demons back into humans and also create a demon by herself. Now, Yushiro also did a lot of damage to Muzan's plan in the final saga, as he was the one who took over Nakime's mind and forced her to lift up the Infinity Castle to the surface, resulting in Muzan's death due to exposure to the sun. And talking about Tamayo, another mistake Muzan made back in Asakusa was to choose the worst option during his fight or flight moment with Tanjiro. I mean, dude, I get it. Yoriichi almost killed you, but you got PTSD from just a look-alike? Guess you should have learned from your best pal Kokushibo and grown 4 more eyes instead of 7 hearts and 5 brains. Also, honestly, a few more balls could have helped as well. But anyway, if Muzan could have lashed out right then and there, he could have nuked the entire area. He would have taken out 3 of the worst threats in his path. That is Tanjiro, Tamayo, and Yushiro. And this doesn't really end here. After being scared to death of literally an early teen, he had to send demons that were just slightly stronger than Tamayo himself and ended up becoming his stepping stone to success. Typical villain monologue mentality. He had multiple of such chances going on in the series, but he chose to ignore them. Like even when he knew during the Swordsmith Village arc that annihilating the village could set demon slayers back by centuries, he still chose to send 2 of his weakest upper moons out of sheer ignorance. I mean, I know Gyokyo is yucky as hell, but dude could have listened to the full info. Even if Mr. Jackson didn't want to listen to Gyoko, he could have just listened to Doma. He was itching to go, or could have just sent Nakime for God's sake. She might have been better. That turned out to be another blunder. And honestly, talking about Nakime, we can go over to the next mistake he made that ensured his defeat. You see, Nakime's ability to snoop at her thousands of eyes wasn't anything new, okay? This isn't Hunter x Hunter, where you'll unlock a new ability every 50 episodes and get a 2-hour monologue explaining it. So probably she had this ability long back. Also, if you remember the events that preceded Muzan's encounter with Yoriichi, you'll understand what an opportunity Muzan actually missed. But when Muzan converted Kokushibo into a demon, he got the head of Kagaya's ancestor on a platter and almost annihilated the Demon Slayer Corps. With the assets he had at his disposal, Nakime taking out one Hashira after the other with the help of other upper moons was a no-brainer. But Muzan had to be out there cosplaying as a kid, a family man, and a pretty hot Lolita all at the same time. Another strategic mistake was the upper moons. Well, not like the actual upper moons, but kind of how they were used. Now, I know they all had to have distinct personalities of their own for the betterment of the overall series, but it was kind of out of character of Muzan to just let them be. As you know, he's been seen to be a total control freak. There were endless possibilities and combinations of the upper demons he could have used right after his encounter with Tanjiro at Asakusa. Hell, even if he called in Akaza from any part of outside Japan, he could have been in Tokyo in minutes to finish not only Tanjiro, but also Tamayo and Yoshiro, practically killing any chances of him encountering any problems later on. But nah, my man had to a farm in an alleyway pumping a man full of fluids. That came out very wrong. I mean, he had to erase his anger by killing a drunkard with his body while chanting 67 under his breath for several minutes before he could summon the demon and order him to kill Tanjiro. Now, we've all been making the Muzan drip and moonwalk jokes for years, but his entry into Kagaya's mansion and the attention to detail of his fit were immaculate. Another thing that was immaculate was Muzan's stupidity of just waltzing into the premises, unaware that death awaited him beyond the doors of the residence. Muzan could have easily sent Kokushibo or some other demon to rake out the premises before he was about to smash in, but that would have been too smart for him apparently. Also, this would have been a perfect job for Hantengu, but as you know, he was already burning in hell after another one of Muzan's stupid decisions to send him to the Swordsmith village. Overall, the obvious trap at the Ubuyashiki mansion could have been avoided had Muzan shown just a tiny bit of restraint in regard to the fact that he had been searching for the Ubuyashikis for years. A few more days wouldn't have been much, but alright, that's too much to ask. However, these last two ways were a sure shot to get him out alive from the final battle. After trapping everyone in the Infinity Castle, why didn't Muzan just go out of the dimension to the real world and let the Slayers fight it out with the Upper Moons? I mean, he could have just asked Nakame to transport herself out of the castle and kill everyone, including the Upper Moons, to finish off the Demon Slayers once and for all. And finally, the worst mistake Muzan ever made was to kill the doctor that made him what he is today. That doctor was the be-all and end-all of all the shit the world had to go through due to his use of the blue spider lilies in the medicine he created for Muzan. At the end, it wasn't just Muzan's ill temper and shoddy thinking that got him killed. It was his ego. His ego never allowed him to think that a human could defeat him. An all-powerful demon. Even though he was almost killed by a human twice in a matter of few minutes, Muzan couldn't imagine that there could be another person better at demon biology than him. But guess what? The combined brains of Tamayo and Shinobu had him beat with the drugs they created. And finally, his quest to become the perfect being made his imperfections even more visible. So I guess we're out of most of the scenarios Muzan could have gone through to win at the end. So let's assume that Muzan was able to kill Tanjiro at the end and consume Nezuko. How would the world have changed with Muzan at the helm of humanity as an omnipotent ruler? To understand that, we have to first understand Muzan's psyche. Is he outright evil? Well, the thousands of humans he has directly and indirectly killed indicate it. Is he cowardly? After meeting Yoriichi, 100%. Is he able to reconcile with the fact that at the end of the day, he's a mortal too, just like other humans he looks down on? That's a staunch no. The fact is, Muzan, even after being evil, is a complicated figure. He's complicated enough to be unpredictable once he achieves his goal, but also uncomplicated enough to not be redeemed of his sins. But what we're talking about right now is his plans for humanity once he reaches the state of immortality. I'd like you to remember two of Muzan's most telling encounters with humans that more or less define what he's going to do with humanity. Remember how Muzan had multiple identities? One as a little kid, another as a woman, and the first one being his own self. But as a family man, well, Muzan could have done without doing all that. But he chose to stay low-key so that he's able to use the expertise of the households he was involved with, which means he doesn't see humans as more than tools for his plans, treating their heads as stepping stones towards his goal. The blue spider lilies. However, do you remember his interaction with the drunkard in the alley at Asakusa? When he bumps into Muzan and asks him to apologize, Muzan actually doesn't lose his composure and apologizes while moving forward, even after the drunkard stops him twice. Muzan shows restraint and apologizes once again. This shows that Muzan sees humans as tools. Other than that, he really isn't interested in anything other than what his goals are, and he's completely fine looking over minuscule things if it saves him time. So according to both of these encounters, life under Muzan would honestly be comparable to life under any dictator around the world. Well, it's a complete shame that we have so many of them lying around the world at the moment, so you could compare him to any of them. Now, his style is mostly covert stuff, so it would be up to him if he wants to just rule from the shadows or be out in the public. Well, we'll never know. What do you think?